This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman, from the Epoch Times. And today, I would like to quickly mention that our show is expanding, and along that line, I'm currently looking for a researcher who can work with me to conduct investigations. And so if either you or somebody that you know is interested, well, please send over your resume, as well as a writing sample, to factsmatter@epochtimes.com. Again, that's factsmatter@epochtimes.com. And let's begin today's discussion by talking about Hunter Biden's infamous laptop. And to start with, right after the 2020 election, there was a, you can say, fascinating survey that was conducted among people who actually voted for Joe Biden. And the results of that survey, they revealed exactly how much power both the corporate media as well as big tech companies have in terms of influencing our internal elections. And so that survey, it was conducted across 7 different battleground states. And they asked people, specifically people who voted for Joe Biden, a very important question. And that question was whether, if they knew about the Hunter Biden scandals before the election, would they have changed their vote? And wouldn't you believe it, almost 10% of the respondents, 9.4% to be exact, said that they would. They said that if they knew about the Hunter Biden story, they would not have voted for Joe Biden. Now that is frankly amazing. Think about that. 10% in battleground states is well more than enough to change the results of the election. However, that's actually what happened. Now the reason that most people did not know about the Hunter Biden laptop story was because the information was by and large being suppressed by the big tech giants as well as by big media. And so let me back up for a moment and set the stage for you on what exactly happened back in the year 2020. You might remember that during the election cycle, just a few weeks prior to the 2020 election itself, the New York Post, which is America's oldest newspaper, they began publishing a series of articles which detail the business dealings of Hunter Biden in countries like Ukraine and China. And within that story, they utilized information which came from Hunter Biden's infamous laptop. Now, the laptop itself, it was allegedly dropped off by Hunter Biden at a computer repair company called the Mac Shop in Wilmington, Delaware. However, according to the owner of that computer repair company, Hunter Biden, he never went back in for his laptop, perhaps he forgot about it, and so the owner of that company, he turned copies of the laptop over to the FBI as well as to Mr. Rudy Giuliani, who then later gave a copy to the New York Post, who then published the bombshell stories using the contents of the laptop. But as we all know, the backlash against the New York Post, it began, well, almost immediately. To start with, the New York Post article was banned by Twitter, supposedly because it violated their policy on hacked materials. In fact, leading up to the election, not only were you not allowed to share the article, but even the New York Post's own Twitter account, it was suspended. They were not able to post anything because they would not delete the story. And frankly, this type of censorship was not coming only from big tech. Mainstream news outlets were likewise either refusing to cover the story, they were dismissing it as being nothing of importance, or they were labeling it as being Russian disinformation. And so, for instance, leading up to the election, just a few weeks before the election, here's what taxpayer-funded NPR wrote in regards to the Hunter Biden laptop story. Quote, "We don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories, and we don't want to waste the listeners' and readers' time on stories that are just pure distractions." However, NPR calling the story a pure distraction was still a far cry from what others were alleging. For instance, Miss Natasha Bertrand, who worked at Politico at the time, although now she works for CNN, she published this article here on October the 19th, which was just 5 days after the initial New York Post story had come out. And her article, it was titled, quote, "Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation, dozens of former intelligence officials say." However, what's really interesting to note is that within the letter from these former intelligence officials, they did not actually state that the Hunter Biden story is Russian disinformation. Instead, they kind of almost said the opposite. Namely, they had no real evidence to suggest that the emails were either falsified nor that Russia had anything to do with them. But instead, they wrote that their intuition was giving them a suspicion based on their former experience. Here's specifically what they wrote in this letter, quote, "We want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided to the New York Post by President Trump's personal attorney Rudy Giuliani are genuine or not, and that we do not have evidence of Russian involvement. Just that our experience makes us deeply suspicious that the Russian government played a significant role in this case." Really imagine reading the sentence and then writing a headline, which is then shared by the White House press secretary Jen Psaki, which says, quote, "Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinformation, dozens of former intel officials say." It's kind of amazing if you think about it, although I would suggest that you don't think about it too much. But of course, you know that it wasn't just Politico. You might remember that this was the framing around this entire story within the mainstream media at large. For instance, here was Adam Schiff over on CNN giving an interview with Wolf Blitzer.
"We know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. That's been clear for well over a year now that they've been pushing this false narrative about the vice president and his son.
And then likewise, you had the same narrative being pushed on almost every media outlet in this country, on CNN, NBC, PBS, Huffington Post, The Intercept, Mother Jones, and so on and so forth. You even had Joe Biden himself, during a presidential debate viewed by millions of people, dismissing the bombshell allegations found within the emails as being just something that was planted by Russia. Take a listen.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the five former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
And that's exactly what. Is this where you're exactly going? What this is where he's.
And so it was right then that we saw exactly how all these pieces work together, because you had a letter from the former intelligence officials who claimed, without evidence, that they had a suspicion that this was somehow Russian disinformation. The media, the mainstream media, uncritically then reported this as being all but true, which then in turn was used by big tech companies to justify almost complete censorship of any reporting as well as of even any discussion regarding the story. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Twitter locked the New York Post Twitter account for a period of about 2 weeks because they would not delete the story. However, Twitter went even one step further. They blocked any and all references to the Hunter Biden email story from any user. No one was allowed to talk about it. People were not even allowed to send the link to the story within private messages to each other. It wouldn't even load. And Twitter, of course, was not alone, because Facebook, they likewise announced that they would use their algorithms to suppress the discussion surrounding this reporting in order to ensure that it would not spread until they could get a, quote, fact check by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners, which for some reason never came. Now, of course, anyone who actually read the emails or looked at the photos or read the text messages that were on the laptop, well, it was fairly clear and fairly obvious that the laptop was genuine. In fact, every effort to corroborate its authenticity, it proved that to be the case. And so, of course, you had the interview with Tony Bobulinski, who was Hunter Biden's business partner over in Fox News, which proved that the emails were genuine. You had a great book which was published last September called The Bidens Inside the First Family's 50-Year Rise to Power. And within that book, the reporter independently corroborated that the key emails on which the initial New York Post story was based were entirely authentic. Within that particular book, among several other things, the author actually interviewed several people who were included in the Hunter Biden email threads, in the email chains, and they provided confirmation that the emails in their possession matched exactly the ones in the New York Post story, word for word. However, the mainstream media dam really broke 2 days ago when the New York Times published a story related to the FBI's investigation into Hunter Biden's taxes, and within that story, the New York Times verified the authenticity of Hunter Biden's laptops, its origins, as well as the emails that it contained. Here's part of what that story read, quote, people familiar with the investigation said prosecutors had examined emails between Mr. Biden, Mr. Archer, and others about Burisma and other foreign business activity. Those emails were obtained by the New York Times from a cache of files that appears to have come from a laptop abandoned by Mr. Biden in a Delaware repair shop. The email and others in the cache were authenticated by people familiar with them and with the investigation. And so, 2 years later, the New York Times, which of course has tens of millions of dollars that they can use to conduct investigations, they were finally able to confirm what we knew all along, that the laptop as well as the emails were always authentic. And so what all this means is that in the days leading up to the 2020 election, most of the corporate media outlets in this country were spreading lies about the Hunter Biden laptop story. The big tech giants were then using that narrative to censor the story, which all then had the effect of misleading and manipulating the American voters. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the segment, 10% of those voters said that if they had actually known about the Hunter Biden story, they would not have voted for Joe Biden. However, unlike before, when Jen Psaki was pushing forward the Russian disinformation narrative, well, she seems a bit more, you can say, restrained, commenting on these most recent developments. Here's, in fact, what she said just yesterday when she was asked about them.
The New York Times has authenticated emails that appear to have come from a laptop abandoned by Hunter Biden in Delaware. The president previously said that the New York Post story about this was a bunch of garbage and that it was a Russian plant. Does he stand by that assessment?
I've pointed the Department of Justice and also to Hunter Biden's representatives. He doesn't work in the government.
If you'd like to read more about either the Hunter Biden emails or the disinformation campaign surrounding them, I'll throw links to all that into the description box below this video for you to check out. And all I ask in return is that you take a super quick moment to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm.